Wow, these materials on mental health are pretty fascinating. It seems like we're really going depth on anxiety, depression, and all that stress that comes with modern life. And let's be real, who doesn't feel that these days? So let's jump in and see what we can discover.
I think what's really striking is how the source emphasizes that mental health isn't just about, the absence of illness. It's about this whole idea of well-being, emotional, psychological, you name it. It affects everything, how we think and feel, how we deal with tough times, even how we connect with others.
It really is like the foundation for a fulfilling life. And yet it feels like for so long it's been, I don't know, ignored or something.
Right. We've often treated like mental and physical health as separate things, but they're totally intertwined. The source makes it clear that if you neglect one, it can totally impact the other. It's like neglecting your car's engine eventually. The whole thing's going to break down.
Yeah, and the source doesn't shy away from the consequences of ignoring mental health issues. It can actually lead to chronic illnesses, and it can even affect how long we live.
And the World Health Organization statistic from the source really drives that point home. Depression alone costs the global economy over $1 trillion every year in lost productivity. So it's not just a personal thing. It's a global issue with like huge economic impacts.
Wow, $1 trillion. That's a massive number. Okay, so we're focusing on anxiety, depression, and modern stress as like the key players in this whole mental health landscape. What makes each of them, unique? Could you break that down a bit?
Absolutely. Let's start with anxiety. Think of it as, that natural fight or flight response, the one we all feel when we're in danger. But when it just doesn't go away and it starts to like take over your life, well, that might be an anxiety disorder.
So it's like anxiety is on a spectrum and we all experience it, but for some it crosses that line and becomes something more serious. So how do we know, when what we're feeling is more than just everyday anxiety? What are some of the signs?
That's a really important question. And anxiety, it shows up differently in different people. The source talks about different types of anxiety disorders. Have you ever heard of generalized anxiety disorder or GE?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't think I fully get it.
It's more than just worrying a lot.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling when you just can't stop worrying, even about like the smallest things. And for someone with GAD, that's their daily life. It's got to be totally exhausting.
That sounds really draining. I'm starting to see how these different types of anxiety might need like different ways of managing them.
That's exactly why it's so important to understand the nuances here. The source also mentions social anxiety disorder, which I think a lot of people have at least heard of.
Yeah, that one seems to be pretty well known.
It's often mistaken for shyness, but it's much more than that. It's this intense fear of being in social situations, being judged or embarrassed. For someone with social anxiety, even the most basic interactions can feel like completely terrifying.
It must be incredibly isolating. So what causes these different types of anxiety in the first place? Like, where does it all come from?
There's rarely just one simple answer. The source highlights how it's usually this complex mix of things. Genetics and brain chemistry can be involved, and past trauma can have a big impact. But even lifestyle stuff, things like not getting enough sleep or having a bad diet, can make it worse.
It really shows you that anxiety isn't just, all in your head. It's this whole mix of factors, some we can control, some we can't. That's, actually pretty empowering because it means there might be things we can do to manage it.
Exactly, and we'll definitely get into those strategies later on. But first, let's switch gears a bit and talk about depression. It's something that unfortunately still has a lot of stigma attached to it, and a lot of people might not even realize they're dealing with it.
Yeah, it definitely needs more open conversation. People tend to think of it as just feeling sad, right? Is that really all it is?
Not quite. The source emphasizes that depression is way more than that. It affects your mood, your energy, your thinking, even your motivation. In fact, it can be so debilitating that, according to the source, major depressive disorder is one of the leading causes of disability worldwide.
Wow, that's a really impactful statistic. So, what are some signs someone might be experiencing depression? What should we be looking out for?
It can show up in all kinds of ways. Keep in mind, everyone experiences it differently, but the source kind of breaks down the common symptoms into three categories: emotional, physical, and cognitive.
So, it's more than just feeling sad. There's this whole range of symptoms that can affect different parts of our lives.
You got it. Emotionally, you might feel like persistent sadness, hopelessness, maybe even guilt. You might lose interest in things you used to enjoy. Physically, fatigue, sleep problems, even unexplained aches and pains can be common. And then there's the cognitive side. Depression can make it hard to concentrate, to make decisions, and often brings like a wave of negative thoughts that are tough to shake off.
It sounds like depression could easily be mistaken for something else, especially with those physical symptoms. This really highlights how important it is to see the whole picture.
That's so true. And we'll definitely talk about ways to manage depression a bit later. But first, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on just like feeling stressed out all the time? It feels like that's become, the norm these days.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. It's like you can't escape that feeling of being overwhelmed. Does the source address this whole feeling of constant stress?
It does. And it's a good point because while stress might seem, I don't know, less serious than anxiety or depression, the source is clear. Chronic stress can have really bad consequences for both our mental and physical health.
It's more than just feeling overwhelmed. It's actually like harming our bodies. That's a little scary.
It is. Stress is our body's natural response to pressure, right? But the key is knowing the difference between acute stress, which can be, motivating sometimes, and chronic stress, which is that constant pressure that just keeps building.
It seems like modern life is like designed to create chronic stress. What are some of the things that are pushing our buttons the most? What are the biggest stressors these days?
The source paints like a pretty clear picture of the modern stress landscape. Some of the main culprits are workplace pressures, those long hours, deadlines, and that feeling of like never being off the clock.
Oh, tell me about it. It's exhausting.
Right. And then there's like technological overload. We're constantly getting notifications expected to be available 24/7, and we're always comparing ourselves to everyone else on social media. Then there are the financial struggles. So many people are facing debt, the rising cost of living, not knowing what's happening with the economy. All of that takes a toll. And on top of that, we have societal expectations, those messages about success, beauty, and achievement that can feel like impossible to reach.
It's like we're caught in this perfect storm of stress coming from every direction.
That's a great way to put it. And all of that pressure can really do some damage to our well-being.
So this has been pretty heavy stuff. Is there hope? Does the source offer any solutions? Like, what can we actually do about all of this?
It does. And the good news is that there are lots of effective ways to manage these challenges. But the key is understanding what's causing them and tailoring the strategies to each person's needs. It's not about finding a magic cure-all. It's about finding what works for you.
So there is hope, even if there's no one-size-fits-all solution. That's good to know.
Absolutely. And we'll dive into those solutions in our next section.
We can't wait.
So yeah, picking up where we left off, let's look at some of the solutions and strategies that the source talks about for, managing these mental health challenges. It's all about getting back that sense of control and building up that inner strength to handle, all of life's ups and downs.
Yeah, knowing is only half the battle, right? It's putting that knowledge into action that really matters.
Exactly. And the source makes it clear. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's about finding that combination of strategies that works best for each person's needs.
It's kind of like creating your own mental health toolkit,
Yeah.
drawing on different resources and techniques.
I like that. That's a great way to think about it. And that toolkit can include things like therapy, medication, making lifestyle changes, finding ways to manage stress, and, building a strong support system. It's all about finding what works for you.
The source seems to really emphasize this like holistic approach, right? It's about addressing the whole person, not
Yeah.
just focusing on like fixing the symptom.
Right on. It's about recognizing that our mental, physical, and even social well-being are all connected. What we do in one area totally affects the others. So let's break down some of those strategies. We talked a little about therapy earlier, but I think it's worth diving a bit deeper. Like, what are some of the key benefits and what types of therapy work well for, anxiety, depression, and stress?
Yeah, I'm really interested in that. I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about therapy.
It's true. Therapy offers this, like safe and supportive space where you can explore your thoughts, your feelings, even your behaviors.
Mm.
It helps you get a better understanding of yourself, figure out what patterns might be contributing to your challenges, and, develop ways to manage them better.
It's almost like having a guide, like a trained professional, to help you navigate all the complexity of like your own mind.
Exactly. And like we mentioned earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can be really effective for anxiety and depression. It focuses on recognizing and changing negative thought patterns and behaviors.
It's almost like retraining your brain to respond in a more, positive and helpful way. Can you give me an example of what that actually looks like?
Sure. Imagine you're constantly worried about making mistakes at work.
Mm-hmm.
CBT would help you challenge those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really true that you're always making mistakes? What's the evidence? It helps you like replace those negative thoughts with more balanced and realistic ones and figure out how to handle those situations more effectively.
That makes sense. It sounds pretty empowering being able to take control of your thoughts and actions instead of letting them control you. What about other types of therapy? Does the source mention any others that might be helpful?
Yeah, talks about interpersonal therapy, which can be really valuable. This one focuses on like improving your relationships and communication skills, since those can have a big impact on mood and well-being. It helps you understand and address, those patterns in your relationships that might be causing problems.
It's amazing how interconnected everything is. Our relationships, our thoughts, our actions, our physical health. It's all part of this big mental health puzzle.
It really is. And that's why that holistic approach is so crucial. Now, therapy is often like a central part of managing mental health,
Hmm.
but medication can also be helpful in certain cases. It's really important to talk to a healthcare professional about that, though.
For sure. It's not about, just masking symptoms. It's about addressing any underlying imbalances.
Exactly. And medication usually works best when it's used alongside therapy and lifestyle changes, and it needs to be closely monitored by a doctor.
Hmm.
Speaking of lifestyle changes, these are things that are often within our control, and they can make a huge difference for mental health.
I love that. It's empowering to know there are things we can do to support our well-being. So, what are some of the key lifestyle changes that the source talks about?
The source really emphasizes things like regular exercise, quality sleep, and a balanced diet. These might sound basic, but they're like the building blocks of good mental health.
It's like taking care of your mental garden, making sure it gets the right nutrients and sunshine to thrive.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. Exercise releases those endorphins, which can really boost your mood. It also helps with stress and sleep. And speaking of sleep, getting enough of it is so important for regulating mood, energy levels, and how well our brains work. And of course, a balanced diet gives our brains the nutrients they need to function at their best.
It's incredible how much power we have to influence our mental health just by making, conscious choices in our everyday lives. But let's be real, it's not always easy to keep up with those healthy habits, especially when we're feeling super stressed.
You're totally right. And that's where those stress management techniques come in. Like we talked about, chronic stress can really mess with our well-being.
And let's face it, the modern world is full of stressors. What are some practical things we can do to manage that stress effectively?
The source suggests different techniques, things like mindfulness, meditation, relaxation exercises, even something as simple as a digital detox. Have you ever tried mindfulness?
I've heard of it, but I'm not sure I really understand what it is.
It's about paying attention to the present moment without, judging yourself. It's noticing your thoughts and feelings without getting totally carried away by them.
That sounds really helpful, especially with how fast-paced everything is these days. It's so easy to get lost in the chaos of thoughts and to-do lists.
Yeah.
What about meditation? Is that similar?
Meditation is actually a type of mindfulness practice. It involves focusing on a specific thing, like an object, a feeling, or even a thought, to train your attention and awareness. It helps to quiet all that mental noise and allows you to tap into a sense of inner peace.
It sounds like a powerful way to find a moment of calm in the middle of all the craziness. Are there any other relaxation techniques the source talks about?
It mentions something called progressive muscle relaxation, where you tense and then release different muscle groups. It's a good way to reduce physical tension, which can really contribute to mental stress. And then there's that digital detox we talked about. It's about making a conscious effort to reduce your screen time, setting boundaries around your tech use, and making time for activities that don't involve, screens.
I think we could all use a digital detox every once in a while. It's so easy to get sucked into the constant stimulation and comparison online. It's exhausting.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's about taking back control of your attention and energy and finding a healthier balance with technology.
It makes you realize how important it is to be mindful about how we spend our time and energy.
Absolutely. And along with those individual strategies, having a strong support system is another key part of managing mental health challenges and building up resilience.
We touched on that earlier, but why are strong social connections so important for our well-being?
Humans are social creatures. We thrive on connection, belonging, and support. When we have people we can trust, people who listen without judging and offer encouragement, it makes a world of difference in how we deal with challenges.
It's like having a team cheering you on, reminding you that you're not alone and that you can do it.
Exactly. And those connections can come from all sorts of places: family, friends, partners, colleagues, support groups, even online communities. The key is to find people who make you feel seen, heard, and valued.
So it's not just about how many connections you have, but about the quality of those connections.
That's right. And building a strong support system is a two-way street. It's about putting effort into those relationships, being there for others, and creating a back and forth flow of support.
It's about creating a community of care and understanding.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about resilience, that inner strength that helps us thrive even when things are tough.
We talked about it a little earlier, but what exactly is resilience and how can we develop it?
Resilience is that ability to bounce back from tough times, to adapt to change, and to handle stress and challenges effectively. It's not about being like invincible or avoiding hard things altogether. It's about learning how to navigate those ups and downs of life with strength and hope.
It's like having an inner compass that helps you, find your way back even when things get rough.
I love that. That's a great analogy. And the source talks about a few strategies for building resilience. Things like developing a growth mindset, practicing gratitude, nurturing those social connections we were just talking about, and adopting healthy habits. We already talked about healthy habits, so let's focus on growth mindset and gratitude.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's a growth mindset and how does it help with resilience?
A growth mindset is the belief that our abilities and intelligence can, be developed with effort and learning. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities to grow, not as setbacks or failures.
So it's about seeing challenges as stepping stones instead of roadblocks.
Right. People with a growth mindset tend to be more persistent, they adapt more easily, and they're more willing to take risks. They see setbacks as like valuable feedback that helps them learn and improve.
That's such a powerful way to look at things. It's about seeing the potential for growth in every experience, even the difficult ones.
Exactly. And that kind of mindset is so empowering. It helps us stay motivated, keep learning, and, build up that resilience. Now, let's talk about gratitude. This is a simple practice that can make a huge difference in our well-being.
I've heard a lot about the benefits of gratitude, but how does it actually contribute to resilience?
Gratitude is all about focusing on the good things in our lives, no matter how big or small. It's about appreciating what we have and not dwelling on what we don't have. And it's about expressing that appreciation to others.
It's like shifting our focus from what we're lacking to, all the abundance we already have.
Exactly. Research shows that practicing gratitude can make us happier, reduce stress, improve sleep, and even boost our immune systems.
Wow, those are some serious benefits. So how can we actually, make gratitude a part of our daily lives?
There are tons of ways. One simple one is keeping a gratitude journal. Every day, you write down a few things you're grateful for, even small things, like a good cup of coffee, a sunny day, or a kind word from someone.
It's about noticing those little things that make life better, things we often take for granted. That's great.
It is. And another way to practice gratitude is by expressing it to others. Saying thank you to someone for their kindness, letting a loved one know how much you appreciate them, writing a heartfelt note. These little acts of gratitude can have a ripple effect, spreading positivity and strengthening those connections we talked about.
It's about building a culture of appreciation and kindness, both within ourselves and in our relationships.
That's right. And that kind of culture helps to build resilience. It helps us see the good, even when things are hard. And it reminds us that we're not alone in all of this.
This has been such a fascinating look at all these strategies for managing our mental health and building resilience. We've talked about therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, managing stress, the power of gratitude, and a growth mindset. There's so much to take in.
It's been quite a journey. And I think the key takeaway here is that we have the power to make choices that support our mental health. And there are tons of resources and strategies to help us, deal with life's challenges with more ease and resilience.
It's not about being perfect or avoiding all the hard things. It's about equipping ourselves with the tools and knowledge to thrive even when things get tough.
Exactly. And that's what this whole deep dive is about. Empowering you, the listener, to take control of your mental health and create a life that flourishes.
As we head into the final part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what about the bigger picture? How do societal factors play into all of this?
That's a great question, and something we'll explore more in the next section. We'll be looking at how things like social structures and systems can affect mental health and what we can do to create a more supportive world.
I'm really looking forward to that. Welcome back. It's been really interesting to explore the inner workings of our minds when it comes to mental health, but I keep thinking about that question I asked before about how societal factors play a role. How do those things affect our well-being?
That's a really important question. And the source makes it clear. We can't just ignore those bigger societal factors. For a long time, mental health has been seen as a purely individual issue, right? But the reality is, the environment we live in, the systems we deal with, even the messages we're bombarded with every day, all of that plays a huge role.
It's like saying a fish's well-being depends only on how well it can swim without considering the quality of the water, right?
Exactly. That's a great analogy. And one of the biggest societal factors that the source talks about is stigma, that negative perception and discrimination surrounding mental health challenges.
Yeah, stigma is so powerful. It prevents people from getting help and just keeps those harmful stereotypes alive. It creates this whole culture of silence around mental health, and that makes it even harder for people to reach out.
For sure. People dealing with mental health challenges often face judgment, shame, even fear of being ostracized. And that leads to isolation, self-doubt, and a reluctance to seek the help they need.
It's like carrying this invisible burden on top of everything else they're going through.
Absolutely. We really need to break down that stigma. We need to create this culture of empathy, understanding, and acceptance where people feel comfortable talking about their mental health without being judged.
That makes me wonder, how do we actually break down those stigmas? It seems like such a deeply rooted problem.
It's a big challenge, no doubt. But the source says we all have a part to play. It starts with educating ourselves, being mindful of the language we use, and speaking up against those harmful stereotypes whenever we see them.
We need to be allies, advocate for those who are struggling, and work towards creating a more supportive and inclusive environment for everyone.
Exactly. And beyond stigma, the source talks about other societal factors that affect mental health. Things like access to affordable health care, socioeconomic differences, and, systemic inequalities.
These are all complex issues, and they often overlap and contribute to those disparities we see in health outcomes, right? It's not just about one thing, it's about all these factors coming together.
That's a good point. For example, people from marginalized communities often face more barriers to getting good quality mental health care. It could be due to financial limitations, a lack of culturally sensitive services, or even discrimination within the system.
It's really sad to think about those barriers preventing people from getting the help they need.
It is. And those socioeconomic factors also play a big role. Things like poverty, unemployment, and financial stress can significantly increase the risk of mental health problems. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Financial stress makes mental health issues worse, and mental health issues can make it harder to keep a job and be financially stable.
It makes you see how connected all these things are. We can't address mental health without addressing those larger societal issues, too.
I couldn't agree more. The source really highlights that we need to address those root causes if we want to see real improvements in mental health on a larger scale. It's not just about individual solutions. It's about creating a more just and fair society where everyone has a chance to thrive.
It's about creating a safety net that catches people before they fall through the cracks.
Exactly. And while those big systemic changes are essential, there are also things we can do on a smaller scale as individuals and within our communities to promote well-being.
It's about fostering that sense of care and support we talked about earlier.
Yes. It starts with creating those safe spaces where people feel comfortable talking about their mental health openly, without shame or judgment.
It's about being a good listener, offering support, and letting people know that they're not alone in what they're going through.
Right. We can also encourage healthy habits, create opportunities for connection, and push for policies that support mental health in our workplaces, schools, and communities.
It's about being proactive and creating environments that really nurture well-being.
Exactly. As we wrap up our deep dive today, I think it's important to acknowledge that while there are big challenges surrounding mental health, there's also a lot of hope.
This has been an incredible journey exploring the complexities of mental health, how those societal forces shape individual experiences, and the power of both personal and systemic change.
We've covered so much. And while there's still a lot of work to do, there's a growing awareness, a change in how we think about these things, and a real commitment to creating a more supportive world for everyone facing mental health challenges.
It feels like there's a real movement happening, powered by empathy, advocacy, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to thrive.
I definitely feel that too. And as we finish up, remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's support out there, strength inside you, and hope for a brighter future.
Take care of yourself, reach out for help when you need it, and never give up on that journey to well-being.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into mental health. We hope you found it insightful and helpful.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay well.